Hello, everybody. No explosion that time.
Hey. Oh, I forgot. That's what I'm telling you, man. Since I moved, I'm all thrown off on what's happening.
No, it's all good. So we're going to change that up, I think, here soon anyway.
Yeah.
But hey, thanks for joining us, everybody. Welcome to another Threat Thursday Live. Today, we are going to be talking about something a little different. We're stepping away from the kind of Windows normal content you guys see and looking at one for macOS. This one's kind of interesting in the way it's doing some things. It's got some tradecraft that's not really seen very often. So all in all, it's a little bit of a different take. We'll see what you guys think about it. But yeah, so for today, we were going to talk about ChillyHell. This one is kind of interesting. It's been around for a while. Like there's been documentation of this out in the wild as long as back to 2021, active out on Dropbox and other places where some security vendors did notarize it. They recognized that it was there, but nothing was really kind of done about it until 2025, where Jam kind of put out an article, and I'll link that here in a second in the chat, that was talking kind of about how this thing was working because they saw a new variant of it pop up. So they did a cool breakdown, and now the malware itself should be kind of covered in good now. The C2 is kind of killed. But all in all, it was really weird to see it last for that long and just kind of be up there in the wild and no one really do anything about it. But with that, let's drop in and start talking about it a bit, Tyler.
All right. Give me 1 second.
So while he's pulling up and sharing screen, we're going to kind of talk through the KB article we have for it today. There's some variation in the way that we're emulating things compared to how the original implant did it. All in all, we built them pretty similar. But as those kind of points come up, I'll talk to them as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess just kind of jumping right into it, and then feel free to hop in if I miss anything or gloss over anything. I know typically we'll go through these and show like how it looks like in Scythe and kind of the output of it, because a lot of this returns like process exit code 0 or things like that. It doesn't necessarily convey as well in that view. So we're just going to go over it kind of in this knowledge base article that we have here. Like Trey said, going over this macOS ChillyHell malware / secondary loader. So initially, same as always, right? You got to do some recon, right? You land on disk, you got to see who you are, what's around you, what users are there, things like that, right? It's kind of bad guy one-on-one as soon as you get on disk. So as soon as we hop on disk, we run a DCSL to pull what users are on there and some information about the users. Do a PS to pull the different processes that are running and pull out the different UIDs and pieces like that on there. That's great to enumerate kind of the what security tooling that it has in place, or kind of any kind of AVs or EDRs, anything like that might become a roadblock later on, right? As well as any other kind of processes or services that are running that you could exploit in the future, right? and then the old tried and true, who am I, right? You have to know who you are. Only people that run who am I are adversaries, admins, and nerds, right? It is a good detection. I don't care what people say.
Yeah, and for this one too, it's got a little more of a purpose in the way they're using it. They're not just doing kind of like a who am I to know who they are in the context of the intrusion. They're using it also so they understand whose kind of profiles they should be looking at and manipulating later as they go to set persistence. That'll come into play.
For sure. So yeah, you need to pull that for some future variable declaration, like Trey's saying. So then after that, now we need to stage the files, right? We have a bit of a lay of the land into who we are, what's around us, what's on the system, etc., things like that. So first up, we'll make that staging directory where we're going to drop everything to and assign ownership of that, so we're able to manipulate it as we need to. Then we're going to download two different things, right? We're going to download the LaunchAgent plist as well as the actual QTOP binary itself. So these kind of work in tandem, where the I'll give you the full name of it here. Let me scroll over for a second. This COM Apple QTOP plist and this QTOP that's being written to temp. The plist is essentially going to give it the instructions for what QTOP is going to do, right? So we need to have both of those in place so it's able to execute the QTOP binary itself. So the QTOP binary is what is actually going to perform some of the backdoor persistence that we have, right? So QTop, once it's downloaded, it's made into an executable, as well as that QTop plist is downloaded. What that's going to do once it runs is reach out to the internet to make sure that it has internet access to it, right? So kind of doing a not just invasion technique, but ensuring that they're not like in a sandbox or something like that. Oh, our live feed keeps freezing. That's what Troy said. Is it freezing for you?
And no, it's not a you thing. It might be actually the stream going somewhere else. I'm not
Somewhere else.
seeing any feedback.
Okay.
Maybe.
Yeah, sorry about that, Troy. Hopefully it works out here in a second. Um, but so from there, once it runs, it's going to reach out to the internet to make sure it's able to reach the internet. It's not in a sandbox or something like that. After it does that, it's going to do some DNS queries as well as some HTTP queries out to the actual C2 domain itself to provide some further instructions. And then it's going to download the secondary shell script that's going to run to perform some additional backdoor capabilities. For this emulation, the secondary shell script that's dropped isn't really going to do anything, but you could replace that shell script, right, to re-download a file or re-execute something or some different pieces like that.
In this case, it's just kind of functioning as a way to write some telemetry for you to see if you can spot it all happening together.
Yep, for sure. And then further down, some more backdoor deployment. Like we said, the LaunchAgent, which is predicated by that plist file that we downloaded before, is going to execute QTop and then do some of that backdoor. Oh, here it is, right here. Got a little ahead of myself. There we go. So the QTop binary itself is going to run a bunch of different things. Before it does that, it's going to open google.com. The reason for that is that you're going to see network connections coming, like it's opening google.com, which is going to launch, right, whatever your default browser is, probably Safari if you're on macOS, but it's going to open that up and reach out to Google. And then right after it does that, the QTop binary is also going to ping Google. So it's designed to be make it a little more confusing, a little bit harder to see exactly what's happening, because it's both reaching out to essentially the same site in two different ways, right? So maybe you could easily gloss over it or something like that. And then it's going to do the two beacons, that DNS beacon, the HTTP beacon I was talking about, and then it's going to download our shell script down here in payload staging. And then the third piece it's going to do, I forgot, or the fifth thing it's going to do, I forgot about this, is create a .profile key value to where that Apple QTop directory is that we made in that initial step of that file staging. It's going to create that. It's going to have our host name, user ID, UID, shell, directory, network status, things like that. Those are in place, so that way the attacker can pull that file back and kind of have all that information and ensure that everything was launched successfully. Then after that, a little bit of time stopping. So time stopping is just rewriting what time that file exists, right? So the time stopping in there is going to change the time that the plist and that the QTop were ran to make it blend in a little bit more, have it backdated so it shows that it's been there longer than it's actually been, right? So if you see a file that's only been there for 10 minutes and now it's doing all these network connections, all kinds of pieces like that, that can look pretty anomalous. So just backdating it to make it look like it's been there for a while.
And this one was actually pretty interesting when I was talking about some of that rare tradecraft. When it comes to kind of like some of the macOS malware and its use cases over the last few years, this isn't really something that's been seen. So this is somewhat unique to ChillyHell in the way that they're doing things. That primary logic they have actually happening within here, QTop, isn't messing with the timestamps at all. It's the actual initial ChillyHell implant that's going to, if it has the ability to actually do like a direct syscall or something like that, it has the correct permissions, it'll try and do it through its own utime logic. If it doesn't have that and it's still kind of stuck in that plain user context, then it'll fall back to touch and performing those shell commands that way. So that's the way we emulated it, is just through the simple kind of touch there. The direct syscalls you wouldn't necessarily see in the way that the initial implant was working.
So after it runs through those time stomping, then we're going to perform some more persistence. So that really is just through the shell profile, right? So it is going to well, it says inject QTop. What it's really going to do is just put in for the .z shell and for the dash profile. Once those are launched, it's going to re-execute the QTop binary. So as soon as you open any kind of bash shell or open Z shell, which is probably your default shell on macOS, as soon as you open any of those, it'll re-execute QTop, and then we'll get another check-in. So in case the original binary is killed or the network connection is killed, anything like that, have some additional persistence in there. And then should be lastly, before the cleanup, just doing some IOC checks. So this test is written as an IOC, an indicator of compromise. So with those, we like to put in some actual like IOC checks itself in there. So it's just reaching out to two known malicious IP addresses, that 9388 and 14872. These are long dead, but just doing a connection out to them to ensure that they are being blocked by your firewall or proxy logs or web logs, to make sure that those are being updated by whatever your security vendor is that performs those blocks or that like intelligence, that threat-based intelligence for you. And then after that, it does a cleanup.
Yeah, quick and easy. Any of the stuff that we potentially wrote, like the variables, things like that, all of those would get cleaned back up by the test itself on our end. So not a very extensive, I guess, IOC test, but this is longer than our normal ones. It's somewhere in between an actual IOC and a threat.
Yeah,
a couple
so
of the things I kind of,
okay.
I was going to say, a couple of the things I wanted to chat to. There are some kind of differences here. I do a quick overview of the way ChillyHell and QTop and all that was actually functioning compared to our emulation. That main ChillyHell implant itself, it's handling the actual like host profiling. That's not coming through QTop. We did that also through QTop as kind of like a writing telemetry for validation. ChillyHell is what's bringing in and dropping QTop for that persistence mechanism as a whole, as well as handling all of the timestamping. When it came to the persistence, those three main methods, there's kind of a reasoning to it, right? That primary method was that LaunchAgent under, user profile library LaunchAgents qtop.plist. That is basically setting it into a per user kind of context. So it'll still survive a reboot. And then as long as that user logs back in, the LaunchAgent will kick and give you access back. From a root perspective, which was kind of like the secondary piece of persistence, if you had elevated permissions, it was going to actually drop a launch daemon at library launch daemons, apple qtop plist. The difference here is that's basically going to provide you that kind of like always on shell access as long as that host turns back on and has that network connection. It's not worried about who logs in and when they log in. So there's a distinct difference there. And then lastly, the actual shell profile injection, which is pretty cool. And I think we've used that in a couple other tests before. It primarily is looking at Z shell with the actual ChillyHell and QTop implants, what they're doing. The .bash underscore profile and .profile are just kind of fallbacks to where it tries to write if it doesn't see the users utilizing Z shell at all. And then lastly, with the actual C2, there's a little difference in how we're doing it. Our primary test and functioning is working over HTTPS with SCYTHE. So we emulate some of that C2, like it reaching out and talking over DNS, because it does use that as one of its DNS mechanisms. The original implants for QTop and ChillyHell would actually hard code C2 to those two IOC IPs that we showed you, but it would also talk over HTTP, DNS, and two other random high ports, typically like 8080 and 1001. So it was supporting, DNS text record over for C2. It was supporting HTTP transport as a backup, and it functioned in a kind of an interesting manner. The one thing that was kind of odd about this to today is it was using kind of like a stable concept to where it would only try that one. Once it saw one of those working C2 channels was good, it basically would like cache that and always try that first no matter what. So instead of it doing like a round robin thing, it'll always go to that known good C2 kind of setup first. And all in all, that's kind of some of the biggest changes or the differences between the true implants and binaries that were being used compared to our test and what's going on. Some of the kind of other cool stuff though that's happening, I don't know if you got a chance to go and dive into this a little bit, Tyler. QTop once it ran through those initial kind of pieces and kind of got set, it was time set, everything was good. It had a couple of different functions where it would spawn a pseudo terminal to you and like actually kick back like a reverse shell and give the user access. And then it had a couple others where one, it could update itself. It'll turn on when it talks to C2, it'll reach out, see if there's a new version. If there's a new version, it pulls it down, installs it, and then restarts itself so that it could be continually updated as they were going. And then the last couple two that it would do was it would have a way to enumerate local users again, like checking AC password, things like that. Then it would actually download its own brute force tooling, download another word list, all from C2, and then use those to actually start doing credential attacks against all of the discovered users that it has. And if it finds a known good credential set, it would write it back over C2. That was something that was a little more complex in the way our test was running, so we didn't feel it would probably fit, I would say, is the idea behind all of that. But QTop did also have that functionality, which is pretty cool. But all in all, this was kind of an interesting macOS test. Were there any kind of key detection pieces and points that kind of stood out to you, Tyler, things you would want to think about?
Yeah, I think always that process hierarchy, right, of having some more of a behavioral type detection that you had there, but like seeing QTop, seeing probably like if it was spawned via the persistence, seeing Z shell spawning QTop, which then spawns network connections, it dropping a file afterwards, really just focusing on that process hierarchy would be a pretty good detection, really more of a threat hunt than a detection piece, really. But definitely like hunting through that for anomalous structure like that, as well as probably the most obvious one being things inside the temp directory, having network connections. So similar to what we say, like when we talk about our Windows detections, if things are making network connections outside of kind of standard installed directories like program files or slash bin slash sbin, that's probably something that you want to be aware of and kind of track down, especially coming from something like temp, or well, there's not really a public, but if things are coming out of temp, right, that's where bad guys like to write stuff too. So definitely something to be aware of and kind of monitor. And then the last one that I can think of would be probably just to monitor for any of the any modifications to your Z shell or bash profile. So if you remember, that's how the persistence is being done, where it's going to spawn QTop again once bash or Z shell is opened or ran, which also probably is going to execute once the system reboots. So any modifications to those files you're going to want to know about, because that should be pretty rare. Like maybe some installed software, if you have it like to start on boot or something like that, maybe would write to that, but generally you're not going to see any modifications to that. So that's probably the highest fidelity detection that you would have out of this.
Yeah, and I would think the other one potentially there too would be kind of the COM applets not living in the correct directories, kind of like we had seen where you always talk about, if processes are spawning not in system 32 or those kind of normal valid paths from a Windows perspective, having these living in a random user directory or just kind of popping up under that user profile as a whole instead of actually living in like the systems library for launch agents and daemons is definitely probably a good indicator here.
Yeah, totally agree. Like I said, again, just making sure anything that runs out of user writable directories that are not like standard installation paths are things that you want to be aware of and things that you want to monitor. Because while there definitely are some normal normal good uses that people would have for things running out of those kind of non-installed directories, it should be pretty rare. Or if it's not, you should be able to kind of suss out if it's anomalous or malicious pretty quickly, kind of based off of who is doing it and what exactly is running.
So all good notes there. Well, that was our test, guys. We want to share that with you. I know here in a couple weeks we'll be talking about, I want to say it was Crash Fix, right?
So either Crash Fix or Mini Plasma or the other local exploit. I'm
Copy
drawing a
fail.
blank.
We were talking
Copy
about
fail.
copy
There we
fail.
go.
Yep. And then we've also got speaking of detections, we've also got another workshop coming up for you guys that will be happening on July 15th. This one is going to get into kind of detection engineering evolution, right? Going from those kind of real plain simplistic like keyword detections into more state-based and dynamic detection setups. So if you want, there's a fancy little banner scrolling at the bottom with the link to the workshops and our other TT Lives. Feel free to register for them. They are free 99. That is always a great price, right? When it comes to training and kind of getting a chance to play in a lab you didn't have to make and level up some skills.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, with that, I think that is probably the first time in a long time, Tyler, we have hit 20 minutes on a
We're
Threat
just at
Thursday
20
Live.
minutes. I know I've been rambling on for a lot of the last couple of ones. So yeah. Yeah, all good. Yeah, thanks everybody for hopping on. Hope to see you on the next one or at the workshop. Yeah, thanks everybody.
So we'll catch you guys here soon.
See you later.